Principles Show daily podcast by and for you.
All right, get ready, because we're going deep into some serious global power moves.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine a world where the US dollar isn't running the show. A world where developing countries actually have some real power on the world stage. That's the future BRICS is aiming for. And their next big move, well, it's happening right now in Rio.
Yeah, it's incredible to see this shift in power happening, like right in front of us. For decades, the West has basically been calling all the shots. But now countries are teaming up and saying, hey, wait a minute, we deserve a bigger voice.
Exactly. And that's where BRICS steps in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've probably heard of the original group: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Yeah.
But things have changed.
Yeah, they have.
The BRICS bloc is growing like crazy. They've already added 6 new members, and even more are lining up to join.
It's like watching the guest list for a global power party just explode. Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they're all officially in. That makes 11 members now. And get this, over 30 other countries are practically knocking down the door to get in on the action, either as full members or as partners, which is interesting.
Hold on, partners. What's that all about? Is that like the B team of BRICS? What's the difference between a full member and a partner?
Well, think of it like different levels of membership. Full members, they get voting rights and a seat at the table when it comes to making the big decisions. Partners, they can participate in events and different projects, but no voting. It's like they're testing the waters before jumping all the way in.
Makes sense.
It's a smart move by BRICS. They can expand their reach without, spreading themselves too thin.
Smart.
All right.
So back to this power party in Rio. What's the official reason for everyone getting together?
It's the BRICS Summit 2025, happening July 6th and 7th. 20 heads of state, all in Rio de Janeiro, all personally approved by President Lula of Brazil. This isn't just a photo op. This is where they'll decide the future of BRICS.
Rio, huh? I heard the mayor is calling it the, quote, capital of the world for the event. Must be pretty excited to have all those big names in town. But speaking of Brazil, they're kind of the leaders of BRICS at the moment, right?
Yeah, that's right. Brazil holds the rotating presidency until the end of 2025. So they have a lot to say over what happens at the summit. And they've been very clear about their 2 main goals: reforming global governance and boosting cooperation between global South countries.
Okay, let's break those down a bit. First, what does global governance reform even mean? And why is Brazil making it such a big deal?
Well, imagine this. The current global system with, organizations like the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, it's mostly been shaped by Western powers, right?
Right.
And developing countries, they often feel like they're playing by someone else's rules that don't always benefit them.
Yeah, I can see that.
BRICS wants to change that. They want a system where everyone gets a fair shot.
So it's like rewriting the rule book for how countries work together globally. But what would that look like in reality? What specific changes are they pushing for?
Well, for example, imagine a world where the IMF's policies aren't controlled by a handful of powerful countries, but instead they actually reflect the needs of all its members, especially developing economies.
Right.
That's just one example. BRICS wants a fairer balance of power in these institutions. They want developing countries to have a real say in decisions that affect their economies and their people.
That makes sense. Give the folks who are most affected by the rules a voice in how those rules are made. What about that second goal? Cooperation among global South countries. What's that all about?
It's about building solidarity and strength among countries that face similar challenges, often because of their history as colonized nations, or because of their place in the global economy today.
Right.
It's about fostering South-South cooperation and moving away from those traditional North-South dynamics.
So it's not just about joining a group. It's about building a whole new network, sharing resources, and working together to even the playing field.
Exactly. This could mean things like increased trade between global South countries, investing in joint projects, and collaborating on issues like climate change. They're looking to create a system where they can rely on each other, not just on, the traditional power structures.
Okay, so I'm starting to get a clearer picture. But let's focus back on the summit itself. What are these leaders actually going to be doing in Rio? Are we talking about signing treaties, making concrete agreements, or is it more about high-level networking and setting the stage for future action?
It's likely a mix of both. Of course, there'll be plenty of handshakes and photo ops. But this summit is also a chance for leaders to, hammer out the details, make commitments, and lay the groundwork for some serious changes. For example, there's been a lot of talk about BRICS nations using their own currencies for trade. Instead of relying so much on the US dollar, this could be a huge deal. It would help them create a more independent financial system.
Wow, challenging the dollar. That's a bold move. But what would that mean for, the average person? Would our lives really look different if the dollar wasn't the top dog in the global economy?
That's a tough question. It's hard to say for sure, but it could definitely shift the balance of power. Think about it. Right now, the US has a lot of influence simply because everyone uses the dollar. If BRIC countries start trading more in their own currencies, well, that could weaken the dollar's power and lead to a more multipolar system, kind of like what they're trying to do with global governance.
Interesting. So maybe less in God we trust and more in BRICS we trust on our money. I don't know. What else can we expect from the summit in Rio?
Well, with so many countries wanting to join BRICS, they'll definitely be talking about expanding membership, figuring out who gets in and how that affects the group's dynamic will be a big challenge.
Yeah, they can't just let anyone in, right? They don't want to risk losing sight of their mission. It's like trying to keep a party exclusive.
Yeah.
But also make it the most popular party in town.
Exactly.
It's a tough balance.
Yeah. And of course, there's the ongoing push for reforming global governance. BRICS leaders want more voting power in those big international organizations. They want their voices to be heard, not just on the sidelines, but in the rooms where decisions are actually made.
So the summit isn't just about, making promises and taking photos. It's about making some real power moves. But I'm still trying to understand this whole idea of a multipolar world. It's a term we hear a lot, but what would it actually look like?
Okay, imagine this. Instead of one superpower calling all the shots, you have multiple centers of power, each with its own influence, kind of like a multiplayer video game. Instead of one dominant player, you have several players all competing. They're forming alliances, going after resources.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would change things. But would it be a good thing? I mean, wouldn't more players just lead to more conflict, more chaos? Things already feel pretty messy as it is.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. There's no guarantee that a multipolar world would be perfect. It could lead to more friction and instability, especially as these new power blocks try to establish themselves.
Right.
But on the other hand, it could also lead to a more balanced global system, one where decisions are made through negotiation and compromise, instead of one country just dictating everything.
Okay, so it's like any big change. There are risks and rewards. But what's the appeal for these countries that want to join BRICS? It can't just be about, opposing the West. There has to be something more driving this movement.
You're right, it's more than that. Remember those flaws in the current global system we talked about? A lot of countries, especially in the global south, feel like they got a raw deal. They see BRICS as a way to rewrite the rules, to create a system that's fairer and more responsive to their needs.
So it's about having a seat at the table, not just to have a say, but to actually change the menu. I get it.
Yeah.
But let's get practical for a second. If a country wants to join this BRICS club, what's the process? Do they, fill out an application, pay a fee, get a welcome packet?
Haha. No, it's not quite that simple. First of all, they have to be a member of the UN. That's the starting point. Then they need to show that they're committed to peace and diplomacy. No warmongers allowed. But the most important thing, the core principle of BRICS, is a commitment to governance reform.
Okay, so it's not just about joining a group. It's about signing on to a mission. But what does that mean in practical terms? What kind of reforms are we talking about?
Well, it's about pushing for a more inclusive and representative global system. Plain and simple. BRICS nations believe that the current setup, which is often dominated by Western powers, is outdated and needs to change. They want a system where decisions are made collaboratively and where the interests of all nations, no matter their size or wealth, are considered.
So less about might makes right and more about fairness for all.
Exactly.
And this commitment to governance reform isn't just talk.
It's at the heart of what BRICS is all about. It's what unites these countries. It's what sets them apart from other international groups. And it's what makes them such a powerful force for change.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's not just about economics or trade. It's about reshaping the very foundation of global power.
You got it. And that's why this BRICS expansion is so significant. It's not just a geopolitical realignment. It's a potential paradigm shift.
Wow. We started by talking about a party in Rio, and now we're talking about a potential revolution in global politics.
Well, that's BRICS for you. They're not afraid to challenge the status quo. They're ambitious, they're assertive, and they're here to stay. In fact, I think they're just getting started.
It's pretty amazing to think about how much the world could change if BRICS succeeds. We're talking about like a total shift in how things work, a whole new way of looking at power and global governance.
It really does make you wonder, doesn't it? What would a world with a stronger, more influential BRICS bloc actually look like? I mean, we've talked about this idea of a multipolar world, but how would that actually play out in real life, in the economy and international relations, even in everyday life?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? What would this mean for, for regular people like us?
Well, let's think about the economy first. If BRICS manages to increase trade and investment between its members, it could lead to some serious economic growth, especially for developing countries. We could see more jobs, higher incomes, a better standard of living for millions of people.
That sounds pretty good. But what about for those of us in countries that aren't part of BRICS? Would we feel the impact of this economic shift?
Oh, definitely. More trade with BRICS countries could mean lower prices for everyone. As competition increases and more goods and services become available, we could also see more diverse investment opportunities as BRICS economies become more integrated into the global financial system.
More choices, lower prices, maybe even better investments. Sounds all right to me. But what about the political side of things? Could a stronger BRICS really change how countries deal with each other? How they approach diplomacy and conflict resolution?
Absolutely. As BRICS gains more influence, it could challenge the way things are done now and promote new ways of doing international relations, based on collaboration, respect, and a more balanced distribution of power.
So a world where talking and diplomacy are more important than military force. That's an interesting thought. But realistically, wouldn't a multipolar world also create new tensions, new rivalries between these competing power centers?
Well, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Having more players on the global stage could mean more competition for resources, influence, and ideological dominance. There's a risk of these power blocks clashing, which could lead to new conflicts and instability.
So it's a bit of a gamble then, potential for more cooperation, but also potential for new kinds of conflict. It seems like BRICS is walking a fine line, trying to balance their desire for change with the need for stability.
Exactly. They're operating in a very complex environment. But in the end, their success depends on their ability to turn their vision into reality, to build a system that actually benefits everyone and makes the world a fairer place.
So much to think about. So much to watch unfold. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the details of BRICS membership to the idea of a multipolar world. It's clear that this BRICS expansion is a major event, one that will affect all of us in some way.
It definitely reminds us that the world is constantly changing, that the balance of power is always shifting. And right now, we're living through a particularly important moment, a moment that could reshape the world for generations to come.
It's like we've given our listeners a front row seat to history in the making. But as we've discussed, this isn't just a spectator sport. What happens with BRICS will impact everyone, even in ways we might not fully understand yet.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to stay informed, to pay attention to how this whole BRICS story unfolds, to have conversations about what it all means, and to think about our own role in shaping the future we want.
This is one deep dive where the learning doesn't stop when the episode ends. It's an invitation to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep engaging with the forces that are shaping our world. Because the choices we make today will determine what happens tomorrow.
Well said. And remember, the future isn't set in stone. It's a story that's still being written. And we all have a part to play in how it turns out.
Thanks for joining us today. It's been a fascinating look at BRICS, their ambitious goals, and the potential for a new world order. Until next time, keep those minds curious and stay engaged. The world is changing, and we're here to help you make sense of it all.